time to join us for our webinar, Creating a Culture of Safety and Compliance with Electronic Logging Devices. I'm Audra Katowski, a marketing specialist here at BigRoad. Joining me today is Matt Malcolm. Matt is an account manager at BigRoad. He is responsible for helping our customers get the most out of their BigRoad experience. He is also our in-house compliance expert. During today's webinar, Matt will share tips and strategies to help you improve your fleet's hours of service compliance. ELDs will track your driver's hours of service, but did you know that they'll also help improve your fleet's safety score? Today's webinar will cover how you can use ELDs to improve compliance and make your fleet operate more safely. But before we start talking compliance, we're going to give you a quick explanation of the ELD mandate, who has to comply, and who is exempt. We'll then provide an update on the Canadian ELD mandate. We'll then move on to how ELDs will affect hours of service compliance and DVIRS. From there, we'll move on to compliance tips and strategies. We'll then conclude with how BigRoad's ELD solution can help your fleet get on the road to ELD compliance before diving into questions. Before I start the presentation, I would like to touch upon a few housekeeping items. If you submitted questions prior to the webinar, I'll do my best to answer them during the presentation. If you have questions during the webinar, please feel free to enter them into the question box. It's located on the bottom right. I'll also be opening up the floor at the end for any extra questions, so don't worry if I don't get to them right away. Let's get started. First, let's define what an ELD is. An electronic logging device, known in short form as an ELD, is a piece of hardware that plugs into a vehicle's diagnostic port via a cord to automatically record data from the vehicle's engine. It records the date, time, location, engine hours, vehicle miles, and identifying information about the driver, authenticated use, vehicle, and motor carrier. This information is then sent via Bluetooth to the driver's device, cell phone or tablet, as well as to the cloud. The ELD mandate is a regulation that requires the majority of motor vehicle drivers to run an ELD in their vehicle to record their records of duty status and hours of service. Why did the FMCSA mandate ELDs? First, it's to make the roads safer by preventing fatigue driving. The second reason is to make it easier and faster to accurately track, manage, and share records of duty status data. The ELD mandate will affect most drivers who keep RODs and who do not qualify for an exemption. We'll cover shortly who needs to run an ELD and who will be exempt. Lastly, it's important to note that the final rule was published on December 16, 2015, giving fleets and drivers 2 years to make the transition. The mandate deadline is December 18, 2017, meaning fleets must transition to ELDs by this date. However, fleets using AOBRDS do qualify for a 2-year extension, which I will also cover shortly. A majority of CMV drivers involved in interstate commerce will need to run an ELD by the mandate deadline. That includes Canadian and Mexican drivers crossing the border into the United States. In addition, there are no exemptions for owner-operators. Both company drivers and owner-operators will need to run an electronic logging device if they do not qualify for an exemption. Although that may change as Texas has updated their hours of service rules to mandate electronic logging devices for intrastate drivers in 2019. No details have been published about exemptions, but we will keep you posted through our newsletter, blog, and social media channels. Which brings us to our next point. Who qualifies for an exemption? There are a few drivers that would qualify for an ELD exemption if they meet the following criteria. As a general rule of thumb, if you're currently required to keep a record of duty status, a paper log, or electronic log, you will have to run an ELD. For exemptions, the drivers who drive less than 8 days during a given 30-day period are also exempt. However, if you log more than 8 days during a given 30-day period, so for example, 10 days, you will need an ELD to be compliant. Another exemption is for short-haul drivers who stay within the 100 air-mile radius from their home office. However, if a short-haul driver does run outside their 100 air-mile radius, they will need an electronic logging device for this time. For fleets with a mix of both long-haul and short-haul drivers, note that while your short-haul drivers will probably be exempt, your long-haul drivers will need an ELD by this December. There is no exemptions for mixed driving. On to the next exemption. If a driver is driving a vehicle with a model year dated before 2000, so 1999 or earlier based on the VIN, they will qualify for an exemption. This is because the vehicle's diagnostic ability is not compatible with new technology. Lastly, drivers who are part of a drive-away, tow-away operation and the commercial vehicle being driven as part of a shipment, so an empty vehicle for sale, lease, or repair, they will also qualify for an exemption. If you got a trailer with empty vehicles on it for sale, like a normal shipment, you are not exempt. It is only if your vehicle that you're driving is empty and for sale. Even if your drivers are exempt, they still have to keep their records of duty status. They do not get to stop logging altogether. We highly recommend that they move to an electronic logbook application like our BigRoad mobile app, which is free to use. With the majority of fleets moving to electronic logging devices, DOT inspectors are going to be trained on inspecting e-logs now, making them the new standard. As a result, paper logs will become less common. Plus, with the changes, it's likely that inspectors are going to look at paper logs a lot more closely as they're more likely to have an error or violation. We're commonly asked if Canada or Mexico requires their drivers to run an ELD. At the moment, there is no Mexican or Canadian ELD mandate. However, if Mexican or Canadian drivers cross the border into the US and they do not qualify for an exemption, they will need to run an electronic logging device to be compliant with FMCSA rules. It is important to note that the Canadian government is in the process of creating their own version of the ELD mandate. At the moment, they've written up their proposed mandate and provided it to stakeholders and companies like BigRoad for review. As of right now, there is no formal timeline for implementation, but the Canadian government has said that they will follow a similar implementation timeline as the United States. Previously, the Canadian government had said that they would publish their final Canadian ELD mandate in the spring of 2017. However, from the looks of it, it doesn't look like that'll happen until summer or fall. As trusted compliance experts, we'll do our best to keep you updated on the status of the Canadian ELD mandate through our BigRoad blog, our social media channels, and our monthly newsletter. With the ELD mandate fast approaching, it's important that you're aware of the following compliance dates. First, if your drivers are using paper logs or electronic logs, you must transition to electronic logging devices by December 18, 2017. If your drivers are using automatic onboard recording devices, otherwise known as AOBRDs, they continue using them until December 17, 2019. If your fleet is currently using paper logs or electronic logs, we highly recommend you move to AOBRDs so that you can qualify for the grandfather clause. After December 18, 2017, you will not be able to purchase an AOBRD even if you wanted to. Don't know the difference between an AOBRD or an ELD? Let me explain. AOBRDs and ELDs are similar in that they're both connected to a vehicle's engine to record a driver's hours of service and other engine data. However, where they differ is in how much editing can be done to a log and how much data can actually be recorded. As the chart illustrates, AOBRDs are far less specific and detailed in what they record. For instance, locations can be manually entered with an AOBRD, but with an ELD, locations must be recorded automatically whenever there is a change in duty status, every 60-minute interval while driving, whenever the engine is turned on and off, whenever the driver signs in and out, and at the start and end of yard moves and personal conveyance. In contrast, AOBRDs only record locations when there is a change in duty status. Which leads us to the next difference between AOBRDs and ELDs: how much a log can be edited. With electronic logging device, there is a limited amount of editing that can be done, which I'll cover shortly. Note that automatically recorded events cannot be changed, only annotated with an ELD. It records who made the edit, when and why, with all edits being visible to DOT inspectors. In contrast, AOBRDs allow for more editing, giving fleets and drivers the flexibility to correct errors as they learn the new technology. As mentioned, ELDs are far more restrictive with editing. Therefore, drivers are very limited in what they can actually edit on their log. As driving duty status events are automatically recorded by the device, they cannot be modified by the driver. Similarly, once they've submitted their log, a driver cannot make any changes to it. Only fleet administrators can make limited edits on a submitted log to correct mistakes or add missing information. After the edit, the driver will still need to verify the changes and resubmit their log. Please note that edits to logs are now visible to roadside inspectors as a requirement of the mandate, and that the ELD will keep both records, the original unedited log and the updated log. Both can be viewed by the inspector. This is why at BigRoad, we highly recommend that fleets and drivers transition to an AOBRD before moving to ELDs. AOBRDs will give your drivers extra time to get used to the new way of logging and the technology. It's really a great option for fleets with less tech-savvy drivers. So now that we know who can edit a driver log, the next question is, how will electronic logging devices affect hours of service? First, it's important that you're aware of the ELD mandate's provision to protect drivers from being threatened or coerced into operating in violation of safety rules and regulations. Motor carriers cannot harass drivers. It also encourages drivers to report instances of coercion to the FMCSA. Although the real difference you're most likely to notice is the simplified logging process. ELDs automatically record a large portion of your driver's day. It will save them from a lot of paperwork and guesstimation, helping drivers avoid common form and manner errors and violations. Another impact of the ELD mandate is that drivers will no longer be able to flex their hours. This is because the device will automatically record their locations and drive times. However, remember, ELDs will be affecting all fleets and not just yours. So how will ELDs affect your safety score? First, let's quickly cover what CSA is. CSA is an FMCSA initiative that stands for Compliance, Safety, and Accountability. It was launched in 2010 with the goal of making roads safer by putting more pressure on companies and motor carriers who pose a high risk on the road. So how do they determine who is a high risk? Well, the FMCA uses their safety management system to assess your CSA score by looking at your BASIC scores. BASICs is an acronym for Behavior Analysis and Safety Improvement categories. They are divided into 7 categories. Unsafe driving, which includes things like speeding and not wearing a seatbelt. Crash indicator, which is based on your history of crashes. That's based on state-reported crashes. Hours of service compliance, which includes logbook and hours of service violations. Vehicle maintenance, which can be anything from failing to make necessary repairs, not securing a load properly, or mechanical defects with the vehicle. Controlled substance or alcohol, which is impaired driving because of drugs or alcohol. Hazardous materials compliance, which is unsafe handling of hazardous materials, so things like a leaky container or missing shipping papers. And the last one is driver fitness, which is anything from drivers who lack training and experience to drivers who are unfit because of a medical condition. Based on the information from all the categories, the safety management system will group your fleet with other motor carriers with the same range of safety events by each BASIC and rank all motor carriers. From there, you'll be assigned a number from 0 to 100, with 100 being the worst, causing your fleet to be flagged in the system for more inspections. So how can electronic logging devices help your fleet improve its safety score? The biggest way they'll help improve your safety score is by automatically recording your drivers' drive times and locations for their logs. Let's be honest, paper logs are not particularly precise. Drivers often have to round up to 15 minutes for tasks that may only take 6 minutes. Plus, with a paper log, it's easy to miscalculate hours and accidentally go over. Something as small as drawing a line in the wrong spot can cost you thousands. As ELDs will do a lot of the recording for your drivers, their logs will have a precise drive time that are not rounded to the next 15 minutes. For instance, if a task only takes 8 minutes, the ELD will be able to reflect that. Moreover, the ELD will remove the guesswork for your drivers, helping them avoid violations and errors and ultimately improve your safety score. How? Your safety score improves with the more inspections your drivers pass without any violations. With electronic logging devices, it's likely that DVIRs can also be completed electronically. With our ELD solution, the DashLink ELD, it allows drivers to fill out their DVIRs right within the app, making them easier and faster to complete. Even better, once the driver submits their logs, their fleet manager or safety manager will have instant access to the log and the DVIR, giving them a head start on ordering repairs if they're required. Please note that even though the FMCSA only requires drivers to complete a post-trip inspection, We do highly recommend that drivers also complete a pre-trip vehicle inspection to ensure that everything is in good working order before they start driving. Now, let's dive into compliance tips and strategies with our in-house compliance expert, Matt.
So, creating a culture of compliance within your organization. You want to start by explaining the hours of service rules and requirements. Make sure that drivers, dispatchers, and back office staff have a strong understanding of the rules and how they work. Explain sleeper berth rules, resets, and limits on drive time. Cover personal conveyance and yard moves. Give them tips and strategies of what to do in commonly encountered situations, such as inclement weather and holdups due to that, or traffic holdup. Explain common mistakes and violations. Give your drivers strategies to catch and correct these errors. Host an information session. An information session is a good opportunity to remind drivers of the current rules and regulations and give them a chance to ask questions in an open forum. Incentivize HOS and compliance. You can host contests for the most compliant driver logs. You could have a recognition wall, a driver of the week, a driver of the month. Prizes can be large or small. You can poll your drivers to get an idea of what they would like to have as a prize. Host excellence awards, or consider a most improved award. You can use a buddy system. If you have a driver struggling with compliance, buddy him up with a driver with compliant logs so he can learn how they can better manage their HOS compliance. Drivers are much more likely to listen to other drivers. Consider implementing an AOBRD. If your drivers are struggling with HOS compliance, consider implementing an AOBRD system. They're more flexible with editing, giving your drivers a chance to ease into engine-connected logging while helping them accurately record their hours of service. Now, getting your drivers ready for ELD. You want to be sure that you have explained the ELD mandate. Explain why it's being implemented and how it will affect the drivers and how they complete their logs each day. Explain how electronic logging devices work and what they will record. You want to start off with your best and most compliant drivers or your drivers most interested in trying out the system. You can trial electronic logging devices and get your driver feedback to help develop your fleet's own best practices. Once you have your champions within the fleet, you can roll out across the rest. Next is improving your hours of service compliance. The first step is to just get fun with your drivers. Make sure they know that safety and a compliant log are top priorities for your organization. You can consider running e-logs that will act as a spell checker for your driver's daily logs. You can go to an AOBRD solution, as we discussed, to help record that drive time accurately for them. If drivers still aren't getting on board with compliance and safety, then you may need to escalate to write-ups. Once one or two drivers have been written up for safety concerns, the rest should follow suit and come into line. Tips for inspections. First off, be prepared. Make sure you and your drivers know what happens during a roadside inspection. Know what the DOT inspectors are looking for, and make sure that your driver's logs are up to date and correct before they get into an inspection situation. Remember to do your pre- and post-trip vehicle inspections. Be sure that you've recorded any issues and that your daily vehicle inspection reports are signed. Make sure you have all of your necessary paperwork and documents. Make sure that they're well organized and readily available during an inspection. Keep your documents clean and organized in a binder. Keep your cab clean. If you keep your cab clean and organized An inspector is much less likely to draw the conclusion that you're careless with your work or careless with your logs. A messy cab can be an indicator that you might not be as attentive in other areas of your work. Be polite and courteous. Don't be nervous. Just be polite and courteous with an inspector. Show the inspector that safety is important to you. And remember that if you're displaying your logs on a phone or tablet, the inspector can only view your driver logs. They have no right to be going through your personal messages. And know that BigRoad is here to help. The BigRoad mobile app can help drivers avoid violations and errors with proactive notifications. BigRoad web app can help track compliance from your dispatch side. You can watch your drivers and be proactive if you notice any issues.
Thank you, Matt. Those were excellent tips and strategies. Let's move on to why a fleet would want to transition to ELDs before the mandate deadline. The first is that ELDs will help protect your safety score by helping your drivers avoid common mistakes and violations. Plus, if your fleet implements ELDs before most motor carriers do, you'll be able to build up your safety score, while the other fleets still using paper and electronic logbooks are going to be at risk of making common human mistakes. Another reason to transition early is that ELDs will help your fleet save time and money by reducing paperwork and manual data entry for both your drivers and back office staff. Lastly, the biggest reason why a fleet would consider transitioning before the mandate deadline is to qualify for the AOBRD grandfather clause. As mentioned earlier during this webinar, AOBRDs are less restrictive than ELDs. Implementing them before December 18, 2017 ensures that your fleet can continue using them for additional 2 years. This will give your drivers extra time to adjust to the new way of logging and the technology without having to make a dramatic transition from paper logs directly to ELDs. Do you have more questions about electronic logging devices? We can help. BigRoad is an industry leader providing hours of service compliance solutions. We were founded in 2011 with the goal of helping drivers track their record of duty status while helping them ensure they were running in compliance with complicated and constantly changing hours of service rules. From here, we quickly grew into a fleet-friendly business that offers solutions to support back office staff, dispatchers, and safety managers to better manage their drivers and safety and ultimately improve their business operations. And now, with the electronic logging device mandate fast approaching, we're helping fleets get on the road to compliance with a solution that's easy to use, fast to roll out, and affordable. Our solutions are the BigRoad mobile app, the BigRoad web app, and our ELD Dashlink. Looking for an ELD solution that's both fleet-friendly and driver-friendly? Ask your drivers to download the BigRoad mobile app. It's our electronic logbook and hours of service management application. It will give your drivers a chance to try the app and get a feel for e-logs. Our app is completely free for drivers to use. To get it, download the app to their Apple or Android device. Our app takes the guesswork out of logging for your drivers. They can easily create inspectable, error-free logs, all while tracking their hours of service. Your drivers also don't have to worry about wrong calculations, driving over their hours, state-specific rules, form or manner errors, as our app will proactively notify them of an issue. If your drivers are already using the BigRoad mobile app, we invite you to try our BigRoad web app. It's our fleet management tool that helps drivers and fleet managers better manage their drivers. With the BigRoad web app, you'll be able to see where all your drivers are on a map and monitor their hours of service compliance. You'll also be able to see who's at risk of a violation and reach out to them before it's caught in roadside inspection. Dashlink ELD is our solution to help fleets run in compliance with the ELD mandate, and it's already a favorite among drivers and fleets. It's the most affordable solution available with no upfront hardware fees. It's a simple plug-and-play device that can be installed in minutes by your drivers, with no expensive professional installation required. Even better, it's a flexible solution that lets you decide when you want to run in full ELD compliance. Meaning if you implement Dashlink before the mandate deadline, you'll have a full 2 years to run under the more flexible AOBRD rules. You decide when your fleet transitions with a simple software download. This makes Dashlink a great option for fleets with drivers who are apprehensive about the mandate or just less tech savvy. That concludes the presentation part of our webinar. If you have any questions about the information we just covered or about BigRoad, please type them into the question box now. While we're waiting for questions to come in, I have a few things you can take advantage of. If you're interested in learning more about BigRoad solutions and would like a personalized demo for your fleet, send us an email at sales@bigroad.com and we'd be happy to set that up for you. If you haven't done so already, get started with a free 30-day no-obligation trial of BigRoad. Getting into the system and playing around with the features and functionality is the best way to decide if BigRoad is the right fit for your fleet. To do this, visit https://app.bigroad.com/sign-up/create-account. We also suggest that your drivers download the BigRoad mobile app. They can visit the Google Play Store or the iTunes Store and search for BigRoad to download it to their device. Lastly, once we wrap up questions, you'll be prompted to complete a survey. If you could take a second to fill this out, we'd appreciate it. It lets us know how we did and how we can improve our webinars in the future. Now, let's dive into questions. Steve asks, does the BigRoad system allow for yard moves and personal conveyance? With BigRoad, the fleet manager or safety manager decides whether they want to allow their drivers to be able to select personal conveyance or yard move within the app. If you do allow your drivers to be able to select the modes, remind them that they should always include a quick note to provide more context during an audit or an inspection. If an inspector becomes suspicious about your driver's usage of personal conveyance, they may look at your logs more closely. Also, remember that you cannot use personal conveyance if your vehicle is still laden. Corey asks, who can edit a log with an ELD? That's a good question, Corey. Drivers can edit only non-driving related duty statuses. Automatically recorded drive times cannot be edited. They can only be annotated. Once a driver has submitted their log, fleet managers or back office staff can make limited edits to correct mistakes or add missing information. However, once they've made an edit, they have to send the log back to the driver for the driver to verify the changes on their log. Also, remember that all edits will be visible to roadside inspectors, with the ELD keeping both the original unedited copy and the updated copy. The ELD also keeps a record who made the edit and when the edit was made. That's all the questions we have time for. The remaining questions will be answered on the BigRoad blog. Thank you for attending today's webinar.